Hey, welcome to Decentralized Revolution, a podcast from the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus and Mises PAC. I'm Aaron Harris. I'm your host. With me is our co-host, Nate Thurston. Nate, thanks for filling in, flying kind of solo the last couple of weeks. You had Austin Paget on 2 weeks ago. You had Dan McKnight last week. I'm back from vacation, and both of my boys are not sick tonight, so here I am.
We're all very happy that you're back.
Yeah.
Especially me.
No, it was good. I listened to them; they were good. But our guest tonight is Aaron Day. There's been a lot going on with crypto, the Genius Act, stuff like that. And I asked Angela McCardle who we should have on to talk about that, and Aaron was the first person that popped into her mind. So, Aaron, welcome. Tell people who you are and just what you think of what's going on in the crypto world right now.
Sure. Thank you. I'm Aaron Day. I am currently, I have two kind of roles. I'm the CEO of the Daylight Freedom Foundation, which is a nonprofit that focuses on warning people about technocracy, figuring out how to basically exit the system and build decentralized solutions. And I am also a fellow at the Brownstone Institute, where I do writing on specifically the CBDC topic, and then also a bit about technocracy. And I got into this I won't go too long into the bio, but I have 30 years of experience as a serial entrepreneur turned liberty activist when my second company was destroyed by the federal government. And in this case, I wasn't targeted. I was actually just collateral damage. It was Dodd-Frank, Obamacare, and the Attorney General, Eric Holder, a variety of different things that turned me into a liberty activist pretty much full-time around 2008, 2009. Moved to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project, became the chair of the Free State Project, did a whole bunch of political activism, ran Super PAC and some other organizations, and finally decided to exit politics in 2018, and was brought back when, I guess I was radicalized the third time when I saw that friends of mine, people were at the intersection of crypto and liberty, were being targeted by the federal government. So you had Jeremy Kauffman, who started Library. You had Ian Freeman, who was at that point hadn't been sentenced yet, but was arrested for essentially selling Bitcoin without a license, even though he had an opinion letter from an attorney in the state saying that it was actually legal to do this. And so I wanted to look into, well, why specifically are they going after these cases that are liberty crypto people? And that's when I discovered Joe Biden's Executive Order 14067, which authorized the government officially to pursue a CBDC while cracking down on crypto and taking a whole of government approach. Literally every federal government department. It was the Treasury Department, the FBI, the DOJ, the IRS. It was a full court press. And because if you're going to roll out a central bank digital currency, people aren't going to like it, and they will not use it if there's competition. So this is why they were going after, in particular, the liberty people that were the most effective advocates at using cryptocurrency as an alternative to central bank currency. So that's why Ian Freeman and others were targeted. So I wrote a book about this, and then I actually ran for president as a Republican because I'm in New Hampshire, so specifically to raise awareness in the Republican primary. And I was successful with this. Vivek Ramaswamy read my book. We had 3 conversations about it. I actually hounded him about it, and he's the one who pushed Trump to come out against CBDCs the night before the New Hampshire primary. Because this was still a contested race, and it's turned out to be one of the worst things that could possibly happen, because now people are complacent about it and think that we're not going to have a CBDC, and effectively we're having something much worse through this Genius Act, which I'm sure we're going to get into more detail about, and which is essentially a backdoor CBDC. So this is kind of the brief version of how I got into this. So I've dropped everything that I'm doing and have spent the last 3 years just focusing on warning people about not only this issue, but about the lawfare that, now has happened. I was trying to warn people in advance, and now people like Roger Ver and others are all swept up in the same Biden era crypto lawfare.
Yeah. Right before you came on, Nate and I were chatting, and I said the CBDC concept reminds me of, it's happened in other states, but in Ohio, where I moved away from 4 years ago. So I don't exactly know what's going on there now, but they had weed is illegal. We're going to legalize it, but you can only buy it from like these 6 stores that are approved by the state, who buy from the 8 farms that are approved by the state. So it's like, oh, so the CBDC sound, when you hear politicians talk about it, it's like, oh, crypto's cool. Now we're going to do CBDCs. It sounds like a very like a bait and switch. And so why don't you tell people what CBDCs are? A lot of our people are obviously going to know, but like pretend someone doesn't know, and contrast it with what Bitcoin and other crypto is, and then why it's a problem.
Well, so first of all, as I've been going through this, what I've learned is that there's a lack of understanding about how our current system works. So we, in essence, already have largely a CBDC. So the way that money is created is Federal Reserve issues an IOU, or excuse me, the federal government issues an IOU to the Federal Reserve, and then they actually create an account for the federal government in an Oracle database. So when the federal government's writing checks and paying all of its bills, it's out of an Oracle database at the Federal Reserve. So that is kind of by definition a central bank digital currency. But
there's no printing press anymore. It's all computerized. It's all that. Yeah.
It's all computerized, and it's computerized through the Federal Reserve. And so this is something that's not known. But the bigger trend and the bigger issue is the central bank digital currency is a digital programmable form of money that can be tracked, that can be programmed, and can be censored. And when I saw that these free staters were being targeted, and I looked into this, I was stunned at how fast this has been growing. So as an example, in 2020, there were 30 countries just exploring and doing research on CBDCs. Actually, China was the only one. They started in 2014 that had advanced beyond the research phase, but there were 30 countries just researching. Fast forward to today, 134 countries representing 98% of global GDP are at the research stage or beyond. Half of those are beyond the research stage. 11 countries have already implemented a CBDC. So you're actually seeing faster growth in many respects with CBDCs than you're seeing with crypto itself, with decentralized crypto itself. So I found that to be incredibly alarming. But then as I dug into this, the issue with this is, so what are people most worried about when you say central bank digital currency? They're worried about money that is trackable, programmable, and censorable. That's really what the concern is. And so people will look at China and say, well, we don't want to become like communist China. Well, I've got bad news for you. We already have all of those things through our existing system. I wrote an article about this for Brownstone. I've identified 13 different federal government programs that are involved in tracking our money and censoring our money. And I'll give you just a few quick examples. The IRS can now use AI and work with your commercial bank to analyze your financial transactions. Most people don't know this because you don't read the terms of service when you sign your banking agreement, but your bank can cancel your account without cause. They can change the terms and conditions without your consent. They can change the fees without your consent. And they can also sell or share your information. So this is kind of a standard, function. So there's that. There's the going all the way back when we look at financial regulation. This really started in 1970. There wasn't any financial surveillance really to speak of prior to 1970. That's when the Bank Secrecy Act was passed. And this is what began this whole anti-money laundering trend. So now there's all of these know your customer anti-money laundering laws, which apply now to crypto as well. So this is why, when you set up one of these, an account, whether it's a bank account or now even with a crypto exchange, you have to give all of this information, your background, your driver's license, biometric information. So all of this started with Congress in the 1970 Bank Secrecy Act. And then it's grown from there. We had the Patriot Act, then we had even the CARES Act. And so what's happened since 1970 is more and more and more financial surveillance, to the point now where you have NSA bulk data collection, you have the IRS and AI, you have something called a suspicious activity report. And this is an interesting one. So if you do a transaction through your bank greater than $10,000, a report is automatically sent to the Treasury Department. But about 2 months ago, in the Trump administration, the Treasury Department handed down a memo in this bid to tackle illegal immigration and said for 30 specific zip codes in Texas and California, we're going to lower that threshold from $10,000 to $200. So now anybody in those 30 zip codes, anything more than $200, immediately a report is sent to the Treasury. And what's important for people to understand about this is no law had to be passed, no blockchain, there was no technological upgrade. So understand today within the existing system, our current government, the Treasury Department, can just hand down a memo and then automatically that's where the information is being routed. And so this already is going on. We already have programmable money. Anybody that has a health savings account, well, what is a health savings account? A health savings account is an account where you get to use your own pre-tax dollars. I mean, this gets sold as a freedom solution, and that gets put in a bank account, but then it's restricted as to where you can spend that money, and it's determined by, in some cases, law, and in some cases by the health plan and everything else. But you can now use your own money literally only at certain merchants like CVS or Walgreens and on certain products that are pre-approved.
Right.
So that is digital programmable money. Food stamps, EBT cards, digital programmable money issued at the state level. So when RFK says, hey, we want to make it so that people on food stamps can no longer buy sugary drinks, well, what do you think that is? Well, that's modifying and programming digital money, in this case, at the state level. So our money is already programmable, it's already trackable, it's already censorable. We've witnessed all of the debanking that's gone on. We had Operation Choke Point 1.0, which targeted a lot of gun stores and a whole category of merchants. We had Operation Choke Point 2.0, which targeted basically anybody in crypto. And then you just have these random things where Kanye West gets debanked, Dr. Joseph Mercola gets debanked, the Trump family gets debanked. But everything that I just outlined, all of this tracking, all of this censorship, all of this surveillance, the boogeyman is not the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve did not actually initiate any of that. All of the financial surveillance comes from either government, mostly from Congress, in some cases through the federal government, and in some cases they're woke bank policies, which is where, in the case of Kanye and others, this was just their bank decided they didn't like the speech, and based on the terms of service, they can actually just cancel people's accounts. So what's happened here is the politicians have done a masterful job of saying, hey, see, we just stopped the central bank. I actually spoke to Ted Cruz, and Ted Cruz had put this bill forward, which I think in essence became this anti-CBDC Surveillance Act. And he told me, oh yeah, we need to protect the financial information and financial privacy of Americans. And we need to make sure the Federal Reserve doesn't preemptively push a CBDC. That was never a threat. Mm-hmm. This was something that was never going on. And meanwhile, Ted Cruz himself has signed onto legislation that has added financial surveillance onto Americans. So now you have everybody celebrating that we don't have a CBDC because Trump rescinded Biden's executive order and then also signed an executive order saying that there's no CBDC. What he's done instead is we've taken something that's popular, which are stable coins issued by private companies. So you have Tether and USDC are the two largest stable coins. And last year, there was $27 trillion worth of stablecoin transactions. And if you're not familiar with what a stablecoin is, a stablecoin is just a digital token that represents $1. And so it's backed by some assets to obviously support the value. But the idea is, and they're really useful for cross-border payments. They're useful for people in other countries. Actually, they're even useful in the United States because it's so difficult to get a bank account. And it's so difficult to move money between banks. There's all these fees. It takes a whole bunch of time. So stable coins have become incredibly popular, $27 trillion worth of transactions last year, and growing to the point that by 2030, there will be more stable coin transaction volume than Visa, MasterCard, and direct deposit combined.
Okay.
So this is an exciting thing that's going on. So what did Congress do? I call it the Ingenious Act. And that what they did was to say, well, if we push to CBDC, people wouldn't want this kind of surveillance. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the force of the state, and we're going to pass something through Congress, and we're going to take something that's popular, and we're going to put it under control of Congress, and we're going to put it in control over the Federal Reserve. So all of the financial surveillance that we have with the current system, we're going to apply that to this $27 trillion worth of transaction volume. And here's the kicker. Why are they doing this? One of the main reasons they're doing this is we have $37 trillion worth of debt. No one wants to buy our debt anymore. China has said ditch the dollar. Japan is not in a financial position where they can buy as much of our debt anymore. So they're forcing all stablecoin issuers to back their stablecoins 1-to-1 by only U.S. Treasuries and U.S. dollars, meaning, as the Treasury Secretary said, he sees that they're going to be able to, in short order, sell $2 trillion worth of treasuries. So to sum it all up, they've misdirected the issue here. They've gone from the real source of financial surveillance is Congress and the federal government. They've made it out that the Federal Reserve is the bad guy. And by the way, the Federal Reserve sucks. They're a useless third party. I'm not supporting the Federal Reserve, but in the realm of financial surveillance, the Federal Reserve isn't the bad guy. Congress is the bad guy, and the executive branch is the bad guy, and the commercial banks are the bad guys. So that's the issue. So they've deflected from that, and now they're taking something that's successful privately, putting it under their control, adding all of the surveillance, and they're using it to fund more debt, fund more wars, and fund the expansion of government. So that's what the Genius Act is all about.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when I first heard about the Genius Act, my initial reaction to it was negative. When I think of cryptocurrencies, I think of stable coins, any of this, my initial thought has always been that the point was to get away from the government, to decentralize. And so now I hear the government coming in with regulations for crypto. I'm like, well, why is this a good thing? I go to look it up, and I really just find a bunch of articles talking about why this is great for crypto. It's legitimized the crypto, and the big institutions and big banks are going to be able to get in, and they really needed these regulations to be able to put all this money into it. And so it's just it's really interesting to hear the truthful side of it, that the Genius Act is actually not the win for crypto that maybe it's being made out to be. I'm correct?
Yeah, it's not at all. So let's think about, the original vision and the original idea behind crypto was Bitcoin was launched after the 2008 financial collapse. And what is it? It's a peer-to-peer cash system that enables people to do transactions without any third parties or any central parties. It was to stop the kinds of things that were going on and the blow up of the financial system and all of the issues that happened constantly with central banks. I mean, fiat currencies never work. It has a 0% success rate. Every fiat currency in human history has failed. The average fiat currency only lasts about 27 years. And so this was a way to separate money and state to stop that from happening. What is a stable coin? A stable coin is a digital token that represents fiat that can be programmed. It is the exact opposite of what cryptocurrency is supposed to be about. You've actually added multiple layers on top of fiat. So you're building on top of the thing that you were trying to replace. And then you're adding all of this programmability and a lot of risk. I mean, as one example, USDC, which is controlled by this company called Circle, well, it turns out they had something like $3.2 billion of their reserves backing their stablecoin at Silicon Valley Bank. So this is a situation where this is even worse than normal fiat, which is bad enough as it is. It's lost 99% of its value and all of these other things. I think your audience probably don't need to explain why fiat is a bad thing. But now you take that bad thing and then you add risk. Is it even backed by what they claim it's backed by? If it's in just 2 or 3 concentrated banks, then if that bank gets wiped out, then that blows out the reserves. So you have technical risk. You have, like I've identified separately, like 15 different layers of risk on top of fiat itself. And now you add programmability. So it's the opposite. But to your point, a lot of people have been talking about why this is a great thing. And it's great. And you touched on something that was really interesting, because I speak a lot at crypto conferences. It's an interesting cross-section of events and places that I talk to. And somebody said, well, yeah, it's almost like you have people that push this nerd money and they wanted acceptance at the big boys table. And so somehow the underlying principles of why we got into crypto have gone away. People just want to be accepted. Well, why do you want to sit at the BlackRock table? Why do you want to sit at the Goldman Sachs table? Why do you want legitimacy from Congress and the Federal Reserve? And the truthful answer is they want to do that because they want to accumulate more fiat. That, at the end of the day, is what the motivation is.
How can we possibly think that Congress and the Federal Reserve could convey legitimacy in the first place? That's the funniest part to me. When I heard them talking about a Bitcoin reserve during the election, I was like, what? Why would I feel better that the government is getting involved in this? I didn't want them involved in this at all.
Yeah, explain what the Bitcoin reserve is and why they want to do it.
I mean, this is another one of these why they say they're doing it, why they actually want to do
Right.
it. So you have this is something, an idea that was pushed by Cynthia Loomis from Wyoming, who also wrote the predecessor bills to this Genius Act. There was the Loomis-Gillibrand Act, and so they've made up this story that if the U.S. acquires enough Bitcoin, we're going to be able to retire our debt. And the whole narrative is, well, this is a separate conversation, which is also not true because Bitcoin was hijacked. Bitcoin was supposed to be digital cash. All of a sudden, it became this narrative of it's digital gold. And so then people hopped onto that and said, oh, it's digital gold. Well, so if we can get in and there's a fixed supply, 21 million Bitcoin, which is also false. There's probably going to be more than 21 million Bitcoin. They can increase the supply. They will probably have to, but that's a separate conversation. What they've bought into and what people in Bitcoin have bought into is that there will only be 21 million Bitcoin. So the idea is if the US government accumulates a bunch of this Bitcoin based on that limited supply, if there's global competition for it, if this becomes the store of value, if this replaces gold or augments gold, then we're going to somehow be able to use this to get our way out of debt. This is the story that they pitched. Now, a couple of interesting things have happened about this. First, Cynthia Loomis owns a bunch of Bitcoin, which should be a conflict in and of itself. You know, if Nancy Pelosi came up and said, hey, you know, here's a press conference. I'm proposing that the American taxpayer spends $1.1 trillion buying my stock portfolio and holding it for 20 years. People might look at that a little bit sideways, but nevertheless, this is what she did. Now, as an interesting point, the United States government has or had, which we'll get to, 200,000 Bitcoin already. Okay, well, how did it get the 200,000 Bitcoin? Did it mine the Bitcoin? Did it buy the Bitcoin on the open market? No.
I have a friend named Ross who who might have an opinion on how they got the Bitcoin.
Yeah, a friend named Ross, and you know, we have a friend. I have a friend named Ian Freeman, and you know, frankly, increasingly more and more friends. The 200,000 Bitcoin was acquired through civil asset forfeiture or theft.
Yeah,
and so, but it gets worse than this. And I don't know what the ultimate conclusion was of this, but I just saw last week Cynthia Loomis tweeted out that she was horrified to learn that it looks as though 80% of the Bitcoin strategic reserve was sold. Now, Bitcoin is on a public ledger. I mean, this is one of the problems with Bitcoin. It's kind of, I call it, you know, non-fungible hijacked digital surveillance gold. But the thing is, it's on a public ledger. You can track the transactions. Only the US government could manage to not keep track of its own holdings on a public ledger, because literally this was a surprise to everybody. People actually thought at last week that we still had 200,000 Bitcoin. And now it turns out this is knocked down by something like 80%. So, because by the way, on the point, Ross, now that he's free and he's been fully pardoned, you know, he should be making the case to get his Bitcoin back, right? Mm-hmm. Well, apparently he can't get his Bitcoin back because they sold it.
Yeah.
So now this is a real problem because the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve hasn't fully passed. They were still trying to figure out how they're going to do it. Are they going to sell gold? Are they going to, you know, use, you know, more civil asset forfeiture? They could use taxpayer money. I mean, they tried to claim they were going to do it in a way that didn't cost the taxpayers money, which is impossible, of course. Mm-hmm. But now that 80% of it is sold, now I'm not entirely sure what they're going to do. But are we going to trust the federal government that didn't know what happened to 80% of its Bitcoin?
Yeah, I want to go into that.
More Bitcoin?
Who sold it? Like, who has the keys to the government's Bitcoin?
Well, I mean, as a technical matter, presumably the Treasury Department, I would assume, although, you know what, I could make a bunch of assumptions about how it should work, and that's a stupid thing to do. I've learned with the government, because it could be done in a whole variety of different ways. Maybe,
could be the FBI guys who took it. Yeah. And why would they give up the keys to the Treasury? Like, there's all kinds of bureaucratic infighting that goes on over very small matters. I can only imagine what meetings they've had about who controls 200,000 Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, no, it's exactly. So now here we are in this situation. So I don't know what's going to happen moving forward, but realistically, I think this is a distraction. I mean, I honestly think the U.S. is at the point where they know this is like one Hail Mary after another, right? It's
Mhm.
it's kind of $37 trillion in debt, $200 trillion worth of unfunded liabilities. How are we going to get our way out of this? So nobody wants to buy our treasuries. So now we're going to get into the stablecoin business, and we're going to utilize that hype to sell $2 trillion. I think we're at that point now where every asset bubble is inflated to kind of a
Mhm.
maximal level. I think everybody realizes that, well, this is just an act of desperation. So the federal government is operating one Ponzi scheme at a time, and frankly, one Ponzi scheme layered on top of another Ponzi scheme at a
Mhm.
time, because there's an interesting correlation between, even the stable coins and Bitcoin itself, which we don't have enough time to go into all the detail, but I will say Tether is the largest stable coin by far.
Mhm.
$150 billion worth of Tether out there, and they've never been able to pass an audit. And twice they've actually been found guilty of, once by the state of New York and once by the CFTC, of not having adequate reserves. And if you want to talk about levels of corruption, because I guess I saw today that Trump may be in the Epstein files or not in the Epstein files, but people sit around and talk about how horrible it was that Hunter Biden was on the board of a Ukrainian oil company, and people talk about the Clintons all the time. Well, let's look at what's going on with the Trump administration and stablecoins. So the last investor in Tether, whose firm invested $600 million, was our U.S. Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick. His firm, Cantor Fitzgerald, invested $600 million in Tether, and his firm manages all of the treasuries that are backing Tether, allegedly. And they haven't passed an audit, but essentially all we have, the last thing that came out, Tether's claiming now that they're trying to get an audit, but it's basically "trust me, bro" from Howard Lutnick. So we have a self-interested Commerce Secretary as one of the largest investors in Tether. It gets even worse. So Tether is minted on a bunch of different blockchains, but the one that's used the most frequently is a blockchain called Tron. And, we're in the middle of this trade war, right? We have all of this tariff stuff going on with China. China is supposed to be the big enemy. Well, the largest blockchain used to mint Tether is controlled by Tron. And Tron is not like Bitcoin. It's not decentralized, where you have computers trying to solve math problems every 10 minutes to determine which transactions get added to a block. There are only 26 different nodes that control which transactions get added to a block on the Tron network. And it's widely understood that Justin Sun controls a majority of those 26, and Justin Sun is a Chinese national. So we're talking about pushing a digital dollar now that's built on a technology platform controlled by a Chinese national, but it gets worse. Justin Sun invested $30 million into World Liberty Financial, which is the Trump family DeFi play, and he's the single largest investor in the Trump meme coin. He invested $75 million in the Trump meme coin and actually was invited to the White House and went to the White House. And he had his own criminal charges dropped by the DOJ under the Trump administration. So, that sounds pretty bad. That to me sounds, that's at least on par with being on the board of your son being on the board of directors of a Ukrainian oil company, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, that's what government does, right?
Yeah, that sounds. None of that stuff is very shocking to me at all. I'm actually surprised it's not a lot worse than any of those things. I guess I'm trying to figure out which direction I wanted to go here. Aaron, the other Aaron?
Well,
Not
yeah,
Aaron.
not our guest, but yeah. I guess my question is like twofold. One, what do libertarians and normal people who want to be free, whatever label you want to put on them, what do we do? But maybe that's secondary to like where so a Ponzi scheme on top of a Ponzi scheme on top of a Ponzi scheme. What's the potential for what could actually happen? You said you kind of got into all this around 2008 when, and then of course that financial crisis happened. I remember when I was a kid, a big stock market crash in 1987. Of course, the stock market crashed in 29. Like, what are we talking that this sort of the stable coin and all this could lead to something like 2008 or 1929?
I think it's likely to be much worse than 2008 because we've been kicking the can. So if you look at where we are right now with what's going on with housing, I mean, we're getting near the 2008 levels with housing, and that's just one of the asset classes. The stock market is now at or even more overvalued than it was during the dot-com era. You're seeing all kinds of things now and signs of weakness with credit card defaults. You're seeing issues with car loans and everything else. And then if you actually compare where we are now versus 2008 with respect to the overall debt level and then the unfunded liabilities based on boomers aging and everything else, we're in a much worse position than we are in 2008. And literally what the Hail Mary here is this: we're going to do one Ponzi on top of another, and we're going to hope that the productivity gains from AI are so great that it creates enough economic activity to plug these holes. That's actually literally what the strategy is at this point. But I think today the administration unveiled their AI policy. But I go back to the whole fact that fiat currencies never work. So what have I done? I started using crypto in 2012. In 2019, I exited the banking system. I don't use a personal bank account, and I use a combination of crypto, gold, and silver. I've got my obligatory gold back. I don't know if you guys are probably familiar with this. These are 1/1000th of an ounce of gold. And here in New Hampshire, there are 150 merchants that take these. And so I've been I've been on crypto and then trying to help others get onto crypto. But more particularly, what we're facing here is actually I know we don't have time to go into all this, but ultimately this is about technocracy versus freedom. And what's actually at stake is free will, our ability to make decisions for ourselves. If this goes the wrong way, if this goes the way that it is going, with stablecoins as backdoor CBDCs, with Real ID, which is the basis for a digital ID, with Palantir having an increasing role, then we're looking at a situation where we're going to be operating under an AI surveillance system with a social credit system, and we're not going to be able to exercise our free will. That's what's at stake. So the opposite of AI surveillance and the opposite of these programmable coins is to move into privacy coins that you have in your own self-custody. So I primarily now use Zano and Monero, but more than just privacy coins themselves. And this is I'm writing a book about this called, in fact, the revolution will be tokenized. I'm using the Ron Paul logo. I actually asked Ernie Hancock said I could use, I'm going to Ron Paul's 90th birthday party, and we're going to be talking about this, but the battleground is tokenization. So stable coins are tokenized fiat. But what's going on, there's something called the Clarity Act, where the government is going to come in now through the Clarity Act and through the SEC and the CFTC. They're going to regulate security tokens. So tokens representing stocks, representing bonds, representing commodities. So we're going to add the same tracking, programmability, and censorship to all of these digital financial instruments as well. And money only represents 5% of global assets. And so these other financial instruments actually represent a larger portion of overall global wealth. All are going to be tokenized in a way by default where it can be controlled by these government entities. And this is actually the end goal of technocracy, is to basically create a global government where you have a single digital currency backed by energy credits. And I won't go into all the detail on that. But needless to say, we're going into this situation. So this is why privacy is important, but also privacy tokens. So the ability to tokenize assets, stocks, bonds, whatever it is that you want to trade, to be able to tokenize those things and trade those things privately, where third parties can't see the transactions and where you retain those tokens in your own custody. That to me is the number one solution that we have to counter what's going on with the Stable Act and the Clarity Act and with this whole technocratic agenda. So this is why I'm bullish on those solutions and moving completely into privacy. But I look at this. I don't think there's a vote your way out situation here. I mean, we can't even audit the Fed, let alone get rid of the Fed. But again, do you know what would be worse than the Federal Reserve? As bad as the Federal Reserve is, I was at a conference, and I was actually on a panel in Dallas in 2023, and there were some politicians there. I'm trying to remember the guy's name, from Ron Wyden from Oregon. And the only thing worse than a central bank digital currency would be a digital currency issued directly by Congress. Right. And that's exactly what they want to do. I've listened to what Ron Wyden has said. So imagine if Congress meets in an emergency and all of a sudden they decide we're going to have a bail-in, and they can directly program the money. I mean, at least the Fed is a little bit of a buffer. And I'm advocating separation of money and state completely, but I'm also saying that this psyop to get everybody to think that the central bank part of the central bank digital currency is where all of the bad activity happens is a complete and total deflection. So separation of money and state here is absolutely critical.
It reminds me, I a long time ago, I was talking to Dennis Kucinich, and he was like anti-Fed, I think. And I was like, oh, that's cool. But like his solution was like either to like democratize the Fed or to have the Treasury do like greenbacks, right? To have the Treasury Department basically inflate even more. And so that sounds like what you're saying, just a digital version of that, taking what the Fed does digitally and just making it worse. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just allowing Congress to directly have their policy programmed into the money. And that is what I've heard. When I heard Ron Wyden on this panel, I'm like, oh my God. And so I'm because I first like, well, why is this guy even on the panel? And then I heard him on the panel. I'm like, okay, now I understand why he's on the panel. It's like, there is something actually worse than a central bank digital currency. It's a Congress-backed digital currency. That's worse than a central bank digital currency. And so just, keep note of that. And so I think it's important that people, but to me, this is the most, again, I dropped everything that I'm doing the last 3 years. And while this has happened, we've seen what's happened to Roger Ver and the people, so Trump declared the war on crypto is over. And, I want to believe that. And I was excited and enthusiastic. And I have a lot of respect for what Angela did in terms of getting Ross pardoned. I mean, that is an incredible and miraculous thing. But unfortunately, if you look at what's going on, so Trump has declared the war on crypto over, but that seems to only apply to if you're the Hawk Tuah girl and you did meme coins or you did some of these other things. But if you are an OG hardcore, liberty activist who actually really embodies and reflects what American values should be, I mean, entrepreneurship and freedom and privacy, all of those cases are still ongoing. Mm-hmm. Roger's facing 109 years in federal prison. The IRS is going after him for, he left the United States and he expatriated in 2014. He hasn't even been a citizen, and they went after him after the fact, after Biden signed Executive Order 14067. So they actually went after him 8 years after he wasn't even a citizen in the country, after Biden passed this executive order. Why? Yeah. On these made up tax charges where the DOJ lied to the grand jury even about, they're trying to claim it's tax fraud. And it turns out that they didn't disclose a whole bunch of documentation that shows that Roger was trying to comply completely with everything that he needed to do. But that in 2014, there wasn't clear-cut understanding of how Bitcoin was even treated. Is it an asset? Is it a currency? Is it none of the above? There weren't clear guidelines. So Roger went above and beyond and hired like 3 layers of lawyers and accountants to try to make sure that he got it right, because he knew he would be targeted, because he was previously targeted for making political statements about the ATF. And so he wanted to do it right. They didn't disclose that to the grand jury. So the case never should have gone forward. Then they sent armed IRS agents to his lawyer's office, took his attorney-client privilege documents and tried to use it against him, even though the documents actually don't work against him. The documents actually, once again, show that he was complying with the law. And then the last one was, he's been stuck in Spain now for, I used to do a daily counter. It was April the 28th of 2024. I'm trying to like the year. So he's been there for well over a year. And they were trying to accuse him that he put forward a motion to dismiss, that his lawyers wanted to have a hearing on a motion to dismiss. And the DOJ was saying, well, he's actually a fugitive. So they were trying to get out of having the hearing by calling him a fugitive for legally fighting extradition. So the case against Roger, the case against Ian, the case against Roman Storm, these are all completely politically motivated, but it was started under Biden and it should be dropped immediately. If Trump truly claims the war on crypto is over, these were the first cases that should be dropped, not the last cases that should be dropped. And unfortunately, these are still going on. Roman Storm is in New York, unfortunately, in the Southern District of New York, where he developed Tornado Cash, which is a technology that helps preserve privacy. And it's a similar case example. He consulted a lawyer before he launched his service. His investors came in, sophisticated investors. They brought their lawyer in, and everybody said, hey, what you're doing here is legal based on these rules. And he was targeted anyway. And so now he's looking at 45 years in prison. And so, these political prisoners need to be released. I mean, this should be actually at the top of the list, because it's more than demoralizing. I mean, it's going to have a chilling effect on any real innovation. I mean, sure, people can do meme coins now. Sure, you can do a stable coin that's backed, that's controlled by Congress and regulated monthly, but with audits with the Federal Reserve. But if you actually wanted to implement sound money or technology that actually preserves people's privacy and Fourth Amendment rights, so on and so forth, apparently that's still a go to jail situation.
Yep. So those of you who are seeing the video version of this, freerogernow.org is up on the screen. That's you go sign the petition. I know Angela's been working hard for Roger, for Ian Freeman, and as you know, Roman. There's all kinds of these other guys who also need to be freed. So the Mises Caucus, we've been trying to get people to sign those petitions, and we're going to keep it up. We're still. That's one of the great things. If the fact that I was on the board and helped in a very, very small way help Angela get elected and then as the LNC and then get Ross freed, stuff like that keeps me going. And I know that, dropping out of politics is fine too. I think we can all work in different ways to hopefully get to the same thing, because I hate politics, but I'm involved because I want a better world for my kids. And we're all, there's different ways to do this. And we need to go to freerogernow.org. I'm going to put the free Ian now.
Yeah, freeiannow.org also. I was going to mention
that's up there. And so what else can people do, given the fact that, a lot of our listeners know about crypto, they probably have Bitcoin and things like that, in addition to, kind of doing the almost agorist kind of way of things, is just keep doing what you're doing that promotes ways to be free outside the state. What can we be doing? Like my first question is where to get good news on this stuff. Because when I was kind of trying to educate myself on the Genius Act, I kind of did the same thing that Nate did. Like all the first 12 articles I found from places that I thought might be somewhat good seemed pretty fishy to me. So who should we be listening to, and how should we get involved to fight back against the technocracy that's on its way?
Well, I've been right. As far as I know, I'm the only one that I know that's completely dedicated to this topic. So, you can find my stuff at daylightfreedom.org and at brownstone.org. I know Catherine Austin Fitz has also been talking about this. There are other sources, Whitney Webb, Courtney Turner. There's a group, and I'm actually going to be doing a lot more content. I have my own podcast, The Aaron Day Show, which I'm ramping up in a significant way and bringing in a lot of these other voices to talk about technocracy and to talk about some of these other issues. But generally, I probably go the deepest on specifically tearing through these bills. I've actually been covering not only the Genius Act, but the previous bills. And then more importantly, what I've been warning people about is the tokenization of stocks and bonds and equities, in part because I've been working on private solutions for this. In fact, we didn't talk about it in great detail, the fact that Bitcoin was hijacked, but probably the second biggest hijacking in all of crypto was overstock.com and what happened to Patrick Byrne. Hopefully I'll be interviewing him on this soon, but people don't know this. In 2018, Patrick Byrne was in the process of converting Overstock.com, an online retailer, completely into a blockchain company. And his view on this is we need to create a blockchain tech stack for civilization. So what Bitcoin was doing at the time for money, creating decentralized money that was transparent and free from these third-party controls, you could do this to other fundamental areas of life, capital markets for one, where there are a lot of shenanigans in the stock market in terms of their layers and layers of third parties, and the stock market doesn't work the way people think that it works. It's not a market; it's a completely rigged situation, which could be cleared up by putting stocks and bonds on a public, transparent ledger. And so he was going to invest $500 million and had already started investing in a keiretsu of companies, a whole collection of companies that were tackling these areas, is dispersed as voting to capital markets to supply chain and everything else. And and that effort was hijacked by a whole bunch of people that came in and basically pushed him out, and then got rid of all of the innovative blockchain companies essentially, or stopped investing in them, and instead doubled down on the online retail business, where during COVID, their largest customer became the General Service Administration. I mean, it's truly a travesty, because had Byrne built out what he was building in 2018 fully, it would be a completely different world right now in terms of having, as he described it, a hot swappable blockchain tech stack for human civilization. It was a really brilliant vision, and a lot of people work really hard to destroy that from a whole variety of different areas, both inside and then short sellers and other outside parties. And it's an unknown story that needs to get some understanding, because it relates to the tokenization of stocks, bonds, and all of these other assets. And there's something called the Great Taking, which I won't go into too much detail on this. I don't know if you've followed it at all, but essentially, a lot of people will say, well, BlackRock owns all of these companies, right? BlackRock and Vanguard, they own everything. Well, that's not technically true. They don't own these things, but they vote our shares, because this is essentially the way this works. I mean, traditionally, if you have a 401k or something like this, if you're a shareholder, you get to vote. That's one of the benefits of being a shareholder. But everybody has these 401ks and these ETFs and all these investment vehicles where everybody now, or not everybody, but most people get through, particularly large employers, most of their retirement is in stocks and bonds. But you never get to vote those, because you've given away your voting rights to BlackRock and to these other entities. Well, one of the things that's happened since 1994 is there have been changes in state law, Uniform Commercial Code, where the next time there's a financial crisis, like what happened in 2008, you will also lose your economic interest in these investment vehicles. It's been carved out so that in the event of a bankruptcy, if your broker goes bankrupt, you might think, well, okay, my broker goes bankrupt, those are still my shares. That's not true. The shares go to the secured creditor of the broker with special preference and special treatment for the 4 largest banks in the US. So you don't own these things already legally. People don't even know that. Klaus Schwab says, you'll own nothing and be happy. I've got bad news for you. We sign 150 click wrap agreements every year, whether it's Amazon terms of service, your banking agreement, whatever it is. We already have given away our privacy, our data, and our ownership, and a lot more than we have any idea of. And so it's really bad when you see what happens with the tokenization of these other financial instruments besides just money itself.
What's the way around that? I wanted to ask real quick. Like, I do a lot of my own investing and everything. Like, am I safe having my own brokerage account, buying my own stocks? Like, I own my stuff, right? Or is that does TD Ameritrade or Charles Schwab own those shares?
They technically, there's actually one company called Seed & Company, which owns almost all of the stock certificates of every publicly traded company. And they're actually, believe it or not, it's CEDE. Look this up after this. It'll blow you away. There's an ex-CIA guy that owns this company, and basically the shares are essentially in the name of that company. You just have a reference to those shares. So no, you're not safe.
I'm going to challenge you on something right there. That's utterly false, because there's no such thing as an ex-CIA guy.
They're always CIA.
That's true.
Yeah, it's do I have your Twitter handle correct on there? Aaron R. Day. It's up on the screen there. Okay, so for Daylight Freedom, Brownstone, your links to your show go to his X page at Aaron R. Day. Thank you for spelling your name correctly. Occasionally people still want to spell mine wrong. So tell us, so we covered Roger, Free Roger now, all that. What else, what else do people need to be doing or watching for? What's the next thing now that Genius got passed, I guess?
So this is a separate, longer conversation, but it does dovetail into libertarians, which is that technocracy is the threat. People don't know what technocracy is. People, when I say technocracy, often even people in crypto circles will say, "Oh, you're anti-technology." And no, I'm not anti-technology. Technocracy is a movement that started in the 1930s, and it's a completely different way of organizing society. And essentially, the idea behind it is that you have elites picking scientists and engineers to make decisions for people. And at the core of it, it's switching the entire economy from a price-based system to an energy credit-based system. And I encourage people to read Patrick Wood. He's written several books on this over 40 years and has been tracking this. You can actually see pictures and videos. Derek Burrows has done a terrific video on this as well. And so there's a big push for this, for technocracy, which is not fundamentally aligned with libertarianism, but it's getting sold as being libertarian, in that it's being sold as making government more efficient through the application of technology. But it's not. That's not what the intended goal of it. The intended goal of it, with all these decentralizing technologies, the point should be to get rid of government. And instead, what we're doing is we're taking decentralizing technology and then we're consolidating it within government and giving more government more power. So you may get rid of a bunch of bureaucrats, but if you're replacing the bureaucrats with algorithms and AI, that's actually not beneficial, because these are functions that shouldn't even be under the control of government itself. So in essence, when I look at what's going on, we don't have the US versus China or the US versus Russia. This has been a 90-year move towards global government through technocracy. And that is the single biggest threat to freedom. And it's actually being cheered on by the right and left. You have Yuval Noah Harari on the left, and you have Curtis Yarvin on the right. And actually, if you study them closely enough, you'll find out they actually get to the same place.
Yeah. And I think it is the global elites, which again, that's a cliched phrase that is maybe empty because people throw it around so much. But when you think about it, do the richest and most powerful people in the world share an agenda, and are they trying to further that agenda? And that obviously is true. And obviously they don't necessarily have, sometimes they may have something that might, make your life a little more easier, but ultimately they want to remain rich and powerful and not to be challenged. And that's the main way they do that, is by controlling governments and deciding, making sure governments do what they want so they can keep doing what they've always been doing. So, and this ties back to, what Nate and I were talking about for just a minute before the show, of like the Epstein thing. Like, there's a reason why I think people intuitively, on some level, they get the fact that there's something fishy with that. Our government doesn't want us to know about it. Well, what's ultimately behind that is, there's rich people who want to keep doing what they want to do, and they don't want, things like real journalism, which hasn't existed ever really, but like they don't want any oversight on what they're doing. And I think hopefully, like the Epstein thing is an emotional thing that people will look at and start, those who haven't, been red pilled, again, to use another cliche, that they will look at that and start asking some questions and see what's really behind all this. And it's not like super secret or whatever. It's right out in the open. They just passed a bill.
Well, no, it's not super secret, but this technocracy movement in particular is well documented. And people are, so somebody asked me today, what's the most important thing? We have to get technocracy. People need to understand that technocracy versus freedom is the ultimate battle. And as with what's going on in US politics, by the way, because a lot of libertarians get this completely wrong. There's a lot of Peter Thiel's great, Elon Musk is great because they're successful business people. So why wouldn't we want them applying this to government? Well, read into the ideology. Elon Musk's grandfather was the head of the Canadian Technocracy Party. Musk has tweeted on 3 separate occasions that Mars will be a technocracy. So this isn't so I'm not actually stating things about, I think maybe he fits into the category of having these views. He's explicitly stated that he has these views. So let's look at what's going on now. 2020 presidential election, J.D. Vance is the front runner. J.D. Vance was handpicked by Peter Thiel and is a big fan of Curtis Yarvin. J.D. Vance is a technocrat. Now we have this manufactured division between Trump and Musk. And so now Musk is pushing America's first party. A technocrat has already won the 2028 election, and people are sitting around acting like there's an actual election with choice. Yeah. Technocracy's already won the 2028 election. The question is, are people going to buy this white knight hero thing? And look, I don't have anything against Musk personally. It's the getting involved in government part that's the problem, right? This is the, I appreciate his entrepreneurial endeavors, but I do not like the end version of technocracy is that it's ultimately based on determinism, and it is based on first principles, but those first principles are more kind of Newtonian physics. I'm not going to go all into that, but this is why it truly is about free will, and it is about free will versus determinism. That's how fundamental this is. So I'm going to be doing a lot of content and then bringing in a lot of others to try to amplify understanding about technocracy, because if you just view Thiel and Musk and their involvement as efficiency, and you're cheering on, well, yeah, they're getting rid of these bureaucrats, but they're replacing it with AI, you're missing the whole point.
Yeah. When I first got involved, I read Murray Rothbard For a New Liberty when I was like 18, which is 30 plus years ago at this point, that I was kind of into that. And then I subscribed to Reason magazine, because this is before the internet was widely whatever, and there was Reason magazine and Liberty magazine, and Reason, it was always, they're kind of the Pollyanna kind of like technocrat kind of, hey, everything's cool, and not quite as hard edged as I like. And so over the years they and Cato Institute, which I interned at a long time ago too, unfortunately they've kind of taken a turn too, which is why, Mises Institute, which Mises Caucus is not affiliated with, but same, decentralization, not trusting that, oh, well, if we just get libertarian or free market solutions into government, then things will be great. No, it's, government will always take something great and screw it up and use it to their own ends. Nate, do you have any other like last minute things before I have one last question for Aaron? But what's on your mind, Nate?
I was going to say I'm a big Musk fan, actually, because of all the cool stuff that he makes. But and I voted for Trump because of the Doge thing. But we were clear on my show that it's efficiency is great if it means that they are cutting out a bunch of the things that the government does. Like, they need to do way less things, delete like 80% of the things that they do. Efficiency is not great if you're going to take the things that the government does and make them able to do that faster and easier. Because if that's what it is, I don't want a super efficient government, because I don't like any of the stuff they do. The efficiency comes from them doing less things. And I just want to reiterate to everyone, like Aaron were saying, that there is a difference in those two things. So watch out for the worst one.
Well, watch out and research Musk's views on technocracy, because let's look at what happened, and we can argue as to why it didn't happen and why most of the Doge cuts haven't happened. But what did happen was Palantir was given an API and given access to Americans' taxpayer information, which is now being used and accelerated, which Palantir is a Peter Thiel company. And by the way, all of this is PayPal mafia stuff. David Sachs, Elon Musk, and Peter Thiel were all part of the PayPal mafia. And so this is working towards the end. And so when Musk says he's starting America's party, it's not America's party. It is actually a technocracy party. Yeah. This is why, again, we don't have a lot of time I'm going to be putting out a lot more information about what all of that means, because it's easy to do the white knight thing and to make it look like, well, he's trying to make these things more efficient. But he's actually, if you really dig into it, it's more sinister than that. And it's unfortunate that that's the case, but it's also unfortunate that a lot of people are going to buy it, and that we already have a 2028 election where it's only going to be between technocrats, and people are already thinking that they're actually having a choice and picking sides.
I followed you on Twitter today. I keep calling it, will always call it Twitter. I keep calling the Cleveland Guardians the Cleveland Indians. So sorry, I just can't change. But follow Aaron on Twitter. I'll put his handle back up there. I'm going to keep following your stuff, and I'll keep pinging you. We'll have you back on at some point. And also anybody else that you think would be a good guest for us, feel free to send them my info. And because this is, like you say, this is a big thing that is, I think, the overarching thing. I think that a lot of us maybe during the heat of the COVID stuff and the debanking, and things seemed really, really dire, and they were, and we're at the last couple of years, it seems like we can all breathe easier a little bit. But in reality, I think they're just kind of regrouping and ready to come back. And I think the whole COVID thing was like a test run for what they really want to do. But again, that's another show. but we're definitely going to stay on top of this. And so I really appreciate your time. Keep going.
I was just arguing that technocracy has accelerated more in the first 6 months of the Trump second term than it would have in 8 years under Harris. And it's incredibly alarming. It's actually been one of the biggest challenges. A year ago, when I was talking to people, and I do workshops, 4-hour workshops where I teach people about technocracy, onboard people and merchants to crypto and all that other stuff, which I'm revamping and rolling out again in the fall. But people were really energized. People saw, Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates and the WEF as the enemy, not realizing, Klaus Schwab's got to be thrilled about how much has already happened. I mean, it took Real ID was proposed in 2005. It took 20 years to get that through, right? And then where's the reaction from MAGA? The MAGA movement will give away any amount of liberty for perceived issues around immigration or other fears. And so we're getting the Klaus Schwab policies, but we have none of the resistance, and they're literally using propaganda and marketing really effectively. Well, yeah, we're not going to have a CBDC. It's a stable coin. And so now we're going to retain, you look at the buzzwords that they're using. I mean, I actually watched the House debate this. I'm like, none of this is factually accurate. And all of this is completely dystopian. And so we don't have a breather. We've actually just lost probably 3 years, and people aren't aware of it. And so this is the frustration that I have with this. And this is why it's not Trump doing this. It's that Trump is being controlled essentially by the technocrats, and he's sitting there taking credit for it, just like he took credit for Operation Warp Speed and never backed down. So I don't think he's a mastermind pulling this, but he's being directed, and it's going really fast, much faster than people realize.
Well, I think, and this will be the final word, but I think that if anything of the Biden administration, the Trump administration, and if you look at history, like the notion that like the president is like really in charge of everything, I think we all know that that's not always the case. So unfortunately, Aaron, I appreciate your time on relatively short notice, and I learned a lot. Everybody check him out at Aaron R. Day on X. We'll be back next week with another Decentralized Revolution Wednesday at 8. Thanks, guys. We'll see you.
Thanks. Bye.